these programming, and really noting the importance of making sure that public policy is a resource that we are providing our members. The next thing I wanted to do is kind of touch on the legislators who are here with us today. And who we're happy to be joined by today is Senator Dan Dawson, Senator Tom Shipley, Representative Brent Secrest, Representative Charlie McConkey, and I don't believe I saw Tom Moore jump on, but Tom, do correct me if I am wrong. But Representative Jacobson does send his regrets. He had a family issue he had to tend to. He's going to try to jump on at some point and say hi, but we don't know when that will be. I did just want to note that as well. Real quick, I wanted to go through kind of the process that we're going to have for this event. I've already kind of done the niceties and the introductions for our piece, but what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the legislators here briefly. They're going to provide some opening remarks and just introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into Q&A. During the Q&A portion, you can put questions in the chat box. We'll be vetting those and monitoring those and asking those to the group as well. Do note if you want your name put in with the question as well, because we want to make sure that's noted if you would like. But also I will kind of go through and just to make sure that we maintain order with this many people and this many legislators in a virtual setting. I'll make sure as we ask questions who should start and then kind of say, hey, Representative McConkey, your turn, and go down the line. So just make sure that we can maintain some order in that regard. But do feel free to put questions in the chat box as we go to make sure that you guys are getting a chance to participate as well. So with that, I wanted to make sure I turned it over to the legislators now to provide some brief opening remarks and introduce themselves. And we'll go down the list as I did with my introduction, and we'll start with Senator Dan Dawson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Drew, and thanks to the Chamber for hosting this. I just kind of caught the end of the conversations and I logged on here. And session is definitely different this year, that's for sure. Probably said it before, but I'll repeat it again. You know, we are just finishing up our third week, and from a Senate standpoint, COVID has definitely changed a lot of interactions there. We got a lot of brand new freshmen that, you know, the social distancing and Zoom subcommittees, we're just not getting the relationship building that you've seen in the past. So that's kind of one of the more unfortunate things, as well as maybe, you know, some of the legislative policy development isn't as far along as we might have seen in previous years. But on the flip side, and you mentioned the Zooming and one of the unfortunate instance this last week, but in some of the subcommittees I've been holding in the last few weeks, I see a lot of people on from Council Bluffs, and that just hasn't, you know, you haven't seen that pass there to go drive the Capitol for that. So I think there's some pros and cons to the session, but that's like the entire pandemic, right? You know, there's some things that a lot of unfortunate human toll, but there is some, you know, modernization, maybe ways to rethink things and how we interact and go about doing business. So look forward to getting the questions here, and thanks for having us.
Thanks, Senator. And next up, we have Senator Tom Shipley.
Well, good morning, all. I'm assuming most of you know me. I'm Senator Tom Shipley, Senate District 11, which takes in just a little bit of Council Bluffs, but then the rest of Pottawatomie County, Cass County, Adams, and Union counties. This is, I appreciate being able to do it this way. Don't get to come up to Council Bluffs maybe and have lunch like I'd like to, one of your good places. But no, I think Senator Dawson has really covered it pretty well. It's a very strange environment in the Capitol, the way we have to do things. I'm always accustomed to having my clerk right there beside me to do things, and you know, making arrangements for subcommittee meetings and so forth. And that's not the case. He's in and out as needed, but it's certainly not as handy by any means to. So we're gonna keep moving on. I see somebody wants to get right to the issues, but go ahead, Charlie or Drew, whoever you want to be next.
Yeah, Representative Secrest, we'll have you go next.
Well, I'm afraid to talk now, but I will. I'm the rookie. I'm the rookie on this call, so this is all new to me. But I'm serving on. I'll just tell you the committees I'm serving on: Vice Chair of Local Government, Vice Chair of House Rules and Administration. I'm on Education Appropriations Subcommittee, which is important because that's where community college funding comes from. State Government, which is a pretty encompassing committee. Transportation, which is obviously very important across the state with infrastructure. And then Natural Resources, which deals with some quality of life issues, which I'm happy about. In addition, I'm serving as an assistant majority leader, so that puts me in part of the leadership team that will be talking about the issues that are coming before the legislature. It's been off to a fast start, and I think we're starting to, we've moved some issues, but education has been the big issue so far, particularly with 100% in-person learning. I think next week we'll start to move on SSA, which is school supplemental aid, which is the increase for K-12 schools next year. And the work on the budget has just started. There's still a lot of discussion going on there, but those will be the issues that will be consuming our time moving forward.
Thank you, Brent. And last, we have Representative McConkey.
Well, hi. Thank you, Drew, and everybody for coming to this. This is a different setup. I mean, it's the best we can do. I'd rather be in person. But yeah, I agree with Representative Segrist on I'm really disappointed how this session's starting out. We're spending our time on abortion, guns. There's death penalty legislation out there that's drawing all the attention. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And I've seen very little on dealing with the pandemic. So I might be a little bit too critical, but I'm really disappointed. I mean, it's off to a tough start, a very contentious start. I'm hoping we can work through this. I mean, I'm some of the, even it started out on day one on the rules. We just wanted the same rules to keep us safe as the Senate has, and we were rejected on that. So yeah, I have a lot of issues with this session, but I'm sure we're going to work something out. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Representative McConkey. And we're going to jump right into the Q&A portion, as we saw someone wanted in the chat. But one thing I did want to note for any one of the legislators, if I ask a question and if someone hits on the topics and you don't really have a lot to add, feel free to kind of just say that. Feel free to pass. Don't feel like you have to respond if there's nothing more that you can add. That's perfectly fine, and I encourage that if you so choose. But the first issue that we want to go to is we'll start with Senator Dawson once again, and it's very fitting because it's a tax-related issue. Tax reform is a big, big issue, as you can imagine, for us as a business advocacy organization. It's one of our top priorities. So can you talk a little bit about some of the tax proposals that are being put out there, especially as we look at eliminating triggers and how IWIL might fit in, and any sales tax, mental health? There was a huge piece with Invest in Iowa put forward last year. They got the pause button pushed on it, and now we're looking at a large possibility for a tax reform bill, and obviously that'll run through your committee. So I'm really interested on your insight on what we're looking at for tax reform. And granted, it's 3 weeks in, so I will put that out there.
Yeah, so a little background here into the, I think you have some, now Drew, I can ask you here, this kind of, you have 3 questions here that kind of all roll into one. I can break this out for the income tax portion, or would you want me to roll it all up here?
You can break it out. That's perfectly fine. It's a big issue.
Sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll focus on the income tax key piece here there a little bit. Last year, if people don't recall, the governor put forward an Invest in Iowa Act. And what that proposal was to raise the sales tax 1%, where 3/8 cents of that would go to funding the Iowa Water Land Legacy Act, as well as an 1/8 cent would go towards mental health. And then the final 1/2 cent of that would be used towards income tax reform and rate reduction. Coming into this session very late, actually beginning of January, the governor stated that she was not going to push that agenda item this particular year, primarily because of the pandemic and just a lack of uncertainty in how revenues will look. We had, an uptick in COVID cases in November and December. The rate is coming down, but I think the March REC is going to be very important for when we start to build a budget as to what we're looking at for revenues to build the FY22 budget, which starts in July 1st. So when she put a pause on that, I don't think she's jettisoning her proposal, but it certainly does lose some momentum for a larger scale income tax sales tax reform initiative. But what she is looking towards this year, which is something the Senate is very interested in, is eliminating the triggers in the 2018 tax reform package. For those of you who don't know, we put a place of triggers in for year 5 of that package, which would take our top rate down from, I think, currently 8.45 to 6.5%, and reduce federal deductibility on the personal income tax side. And why that's important, because most of our businesses are incorporated as an S corp, which would be a small business tax code, or small business portion, the personal income tax of the code, as well as families and everything. So I think a more large scale reform probably won't take place until the next legislative session. And the focus this year is going to be eliminating those triggers, because what the triggers were in the last year was if the state hits 4% growth and hits a revenue target, then that would come into place. The problem with that is that businesses, they're typically trying to plan out, they're paying for it on their taxes. And so when a business is waiting year to year to see what the final numbers are, 2 or 3 months out, that doesn't give them a whole lot of predictability in how they start to scale in and pay for those taxes next year. So from the Senate standpoint, I think you're going to see a large initiative to remove those triggers and actually get some certainty for the beginning year FY23 to bring that top income tax rate down to 6.5%. There's a trickle down effect through the rest of the brackets and consolidating to about 4 different rates.
Thank you, Senator Dawson. And as I noted, it's the Senate's taken the lead on that tax reform bill. And if you don't know, Senator Dawson's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is where that policy would come out of. Hence, obviously, us wanting to converse with him quite a bit about what that would look like. Senator Shipley, do you have any comments that you would like to add regarding the prospects of tax reform this session?
No, I don't. I'm not on Ways and Means, and I'm chair of local government, plus my other committees, including judiciary. So I haven't really had any opportunity to look into any of that. I'm just going to kind of see what my colleagues are doing and follow their lead.
Okay. And Representative McConkey and Segrist, I welcome any input you have on it.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I said tongue in cheek that I'm the new person here, but it is true. When they passed that legislation, the House, I understand, was very, very strong on having the trigger language in there. And so as we move ahead and the governor has suggested removing the triggers, I will need to be convinced that we can fund the priorities that we need to fund and remove the trigger language, and it won't have a detrimental effect on the budget process. And that may be the case because we almost are meeting those triggers. But from my viewpoint, I'm going to have to look at that and see if that makes sense to remove the triggers, because the House felt very strongly those triggers should be in there.
Well, I do agree with Representative Segrist on that. I mean, the triggers were put in there just in case we don't have the able to fund our necessary needs. And then the amounts were in there for that reason. So that's telling me we're not going to meet the Senate don't think we're going to meet them goals if they got to remove the triggers. And when it was first instituted, when first coming, I had questions on if this is such a good deal, why do we have the triggers? I mean, I go both ways on that, but yeah, I'd have to see the full package. I'm in Ways and Means too, so I'm sure it's going to come through my committee, and we'll go from there.
And one follow-up question I'll have, and I'll start with Senator Dawson again and it involves tax reform. I don't want to take the entire time to just talk about tax reform, but it's an important topic for us as an organization of the impact of tax credits. We've seen some like research activities tax credit get looked at. We know Director Durham has some proposals that she wants to put forward with her cap and moving some priorities around on her tax credit package and overall levels of support she can provide local communities. Can you talk a little bit about preliminarily what you're looking at and how the impacts of tax credits may be involved in that process?
Yeah, and for this one, I'd say we're a lot further along in the early stages of this discussion than say on the income tax and the trigger discussion there internally in the Senate and with Director Durham there. You know, to give her lots of credit, she's a smart individual, very well versed in economic development, and she has a lot of good ideas. You know, but I think if we're going to look at a three branches of government concept here. You have the governor, the executive, and you have the legislative branch. She has some credits that are going, they're not being used to their full extent. And what Director Durham's perspective would be is to loosen up some of those restrictions that are currently in code, so she can use those additional credits. And there's some validity to that. I would say from a legislative branch standpoint, though, that if we have extra money out there in some of these credits, the whole basis for credits to begin with is their economic levers, or they've been used as compensation for not doing large scale tax reform. So as we start to go through her suggestions and proposals as what she'd like to do on moving some of those pots of money around and loosening up flexibility, we're certainly going to be giving a strong look as to, is there any monies in those pots that could be used for a broader base reduction to get to more Iowans, as opposed to a few particular projects. We've already met once. She's got some interesting proposals there, and we'll be meeting again multiple times, I can guarantee, down the road. And rather research and development credit, I think there's a lot of merit to what she would like to do to try to cap that refundability rate. But how that fits in the overall, economic impact, not just on the state, but on these businesses, is going to have to be a conversation as well, too. Because one thing I'm not interested in is eliminating a bunch of credits and leaving our corporate income rate at 9.8%, which is the highest of our surrounding states, and leaving our income tax rate at 8.45%, and then we're right back to where we started, where we have these burdensome rates, and what credits we're compensating on one end are now gone. So that'll be a conversation down the road, but that's probably in the very infant stages right now. The department has not filed a bill yet, so we don't have actually stuff down on paper to start from a dry ink standpoint, as opposed to just a larger conversation.
I don't have any more on that, if that's what you're waiting for. Like I say, I'm on Ways and Means until I see it come through my committee and really get in depth on it. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to be looking at.
Senator Shipley, Representative Segrist, do you have anything you'd like to add on the tax credit discussion? No? Okay, one thing I did want to note, I apologize, I was muted, is what Senator Dawson said about the tax rate and then the tax credits, how those need to go hand in hand to make sure that we're competitive with our states. That's something we agree with as well. Senator Dawson, we have some good information on some of the projects that have used some of those tax credits that we look forward to sharing with you and having some conversations about offline. So thank you. The next piece that I want to touch on, it does involve tax credits again, but there's a piece of that's separate from the tax reform discussion, and there are pieces that the governor talked about within her condition of the state address. And we'll start with Representative Segrist on this one, and it's the housing bill. And it really kind of touches on, your workforce housing tax credits and really increasing the amount of money going into that pool. Also, the new housing tax credit that's kind of been proposed by Debbie, by Director Durham from Iowa Economic Development Authority and Iowa Finance Authority, but also the Brownfield Grayfield tax credit. Those are ones that we have used, we found very useful. So I'm just kind of curious for your guys' perspective and insight on your feelings on the proposals for the increased investment and extensions in some cases of some of these tax credit programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those are very important issues. I don't serve on Ways and Means, and so I'm not sure exactly how they're moving. Of course, Ways and Means and Appropriations Committees are exempt from the funnels we use in terms of getting bills moving. So some of those things don't get taken up till later in the session. But the Brownfield and the Grayfields issues, I think, does need to be extended, at least as far as I know. From what I know about it, those have been helpful economic development tools. The workforce housing tax credits, which they made a change, I think it was a year or two years ago, where the 11 biggest counties were taken out of the equation for 1 year to let that money go into the more rural counties. And then I believe the legislation said they were going to up the amount of tax credits that are available for workforce housing. And I think we need to continue to work in that direction as we face faced workforce development situation in Iowa, which is substantial and bleak sometimes. I think those are issues that we need to address legislatively. And so all those issues combined, I think, is something we need to be looking at where it's appropriate to increase those tax credits, particularly with workforce housing. But we'll have to wait and see how that fits into the entire budget as it moves forward.
Thanks, Representative Seacrest. And we'll jump to Representative McConkey.
Yeah, Representative Seacrest covered that quite well. It was 2 years ago. I come through my committee on the small cities. They diverted all. We added $10 million to workforce tax credit, and for 1 year it diverted to the small cities, which is rural, and it did not Council Bluffs and basically our county out of it. But yeah, not all tax credits are the same. I think what the ones we're talking about here are ones that are needed, and I'm glad to see it extended. I know the brownfield, greenfield tax credit. I mean, there's places in Carter Lake that qualify for that, and I think that's a good that city owns, and that would, when they go to sell it, they get that qualified, that can go along with whoever buys the property. But yeah, it's I believe them are good credits. It make any tax credit that drives the economy and improves where our places to live and improves the city and the county. And I think we should invest in those heavily.
Thank you, Representative McConkey. Senator Shipley.
I don't really have anything to add to that. Again, it's pretty much out of my wheelhouse, but I want to watch that because I know the gray fields and brownfields are a big issue with you folks. So.
And then Senator Dawson will close with you, and I promise we'll move on from tax conversations.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think, this was obviously a governor initiative as well, too. And there's certainly a demand out there for them. I won't add to anything anyone has said about it, but I will say this: as part of the governor's proposal is to raise the workforce housing development credit, I believe, from 25 or 20 up to $50 million over the next 3 years, and then bring it down. Her reasoning for that, my understanding, is to try to clear out some of the backlog that there is right now for the application of those credits with some of the builders and everything. My concern is that every time we create a credit or increase a credit, my short experience as the Ways and Means Chair is that there is a huge lobby out there for every individual one that will come in and fight like hell once that thing is ready to expire or be reduced. So while I believe the sincerity of wanting to raise it for 3 years to $50 million, my concern is at the end of that 3 years, it's going to be extremely difficult to roll that thing back to the baseline of where it's at right now. It's around $25 million. That's gonna be a conversation we're gonna have, going forward as well, particularly from the appropriation side, what monies are there available. My personal preference is that we find an increase that will be a sustainable one, as opposed to supercharging for a few years, because I don't want to put that problem on a future General Assembly of having to fight off a army of builders out there trying to maintain that credit. So conversation or more to follow on that.
Thanks, Senator Dawson. The next question will start with Senator Shipley, and it has to do with school choice. It's something we've had a lot of people entering some things into the chat box, and the vote was just taken in the Senate last night on that bill, so it's timely. So can you talk a little bit about the school choice legislation, your thoughts on it, and where you see it going now that it heads over to the House?
Well, I'll take that last question first. How it's gonna work in the House, I have absolutely no idea. I have not talked with Representative Moore, Representative Jacobson about it. I think that bill, it did have a fair amount of misunderstanding because actually when the scholarship part, or whatever you want to call it, some people call it vouchers, there is not one child in Pottawatomie County that would qualify for a voucher. The only kids that are able to receive that or make use of that are in buildings where that building has been determined to be deficient by federal standards in their educational progress. If your student is in one of those buildings, and there are none in my district at all, none in Senator Dawson's district, that would qualify for one of those scholarships or whatever. Now, yes, I did vote against it for a variety of reasons. I've had issues with kids changing districts for whatever reasons for many years. And so I'm not going to get into, I could go on with about that topic all afternoon, and you guys aren't interested in that. But I think it's the issues are coming down to where there are some school districts who will deny their kids an opportunity to go to another school district. And some of those, there are about 35 buildings across the state of Iowa. Like I say, it's not districts, it's buildings where they have been determined to be deficient. Those students would qualify to go somewhere else. And so consequently, that's what a lot of the miscommunication about it was. And I think that's unfortunate because we were all getting blasted with emails, and some of them with emails that information that they were good, good intentions, but they had been given bad information. Nonetheless, yeah, it was a long, drawn out discussion, and I think the idea behind it is good, that all kids receive a quality education. And we've got cases coming up in places where we're finding out the kids are, especially in the last year with the pandemic issues, that some kids are getting left behind, and it doesn't have to happen.
Thank you, Senator. And we'll go to Senator Dawson before we jump over to Brent and Charlie.
Yeah, I'll key up on that as well too. I think Senator Shipley covered a lot of that there about the misinformation regarding that bill. I would start off, actually, I was going through my emails here this morning, a chance to catch up, and I had a nice note from a mom in the Polk County area. I won't name the school district or anything, but she sent a note in, and she said that next week will be the first week since last March that her child has been in a class for 5 days a week. And during that time, she had to spend just shy of $1,000 on hiring outside tutoring to help her child for math and reading in particular, because she saw that kid falling behind every day. And this is the governor's bill. I think we can all say that if we had the opportunity to write it, we might look differently in one form or fashion. But to give the governor her credit, she is seeing a lot of issues in different parts of the state that we don't see here in Pottawatomie County. One of the big tenets in that bill is eliminating the voluntary diversity plan, which to me is probably one of the biggest reasons to support that bill. Growing up, I open enrolled into Abraham Lincoln High School. I wasn't even aware till a few years ago, we had districts that you cannot open enroll out of. Because there's about 5 districts across the state where you're locked in. So what do you say to a family in one of those 34 buildings during this pandemic that's not allowed to open and roll out, and they're trapped inside of one of those school buildings? I mean, that's a conversation that needs to be had. I had to talk to some other person there earlier on. There's the conversation that, well, maybe we should pour some more resources into that, building per se. And there's some merit to that. But then also have to look at the opposite side as well, too, is why do you're going to create an equity where you're not going to reward schools that are otherwise, able to perform with the funds they have allotted. And you're going to moving funds towards ones that are underperforming. And the underperforming ones typically just don't fall on and off. It's a multi-year issue to get those school buildings turned around. I've always been pretty clear on the whole voucher ESA thing. I think every parent should have some skin in the game, but that's not the proposal that the governor put forward. It's specifically targeted to those 34 buildings of the thousands we have in the state and how do you help those families instead of just being stuck in a district you can't open and roll out of, as well as a building that's failing. So that being said, this is going to be a long conversation. Kind of reminds me back into the tax reform bill of 2018, if everyone recalls that the Senate passed a rather large bill out, and that conversation continued for some time afterwards, and then came together at the House and figured out what the final package looked like. I would imagine this bill is going to go through the same process. I'm going to imagine as well, too, that some of these components will likely fall off there, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. The president has a slogan that says, build back better. And going through this pandemic, there's a lot of conversations to be had in education, this being one of those conversations.
Thank you, Senator. And I will note I'm not going to specifically ask or read any of the items from the chat box on some of these issues, but Dr. Knost from Lewis Central did post something if you're interested in looking at that. And there's been another couple comments as well if people are interested in looking at those. But Representative Segrist, I wanted to give you a chance to speak to it. I know obviously it passed the Senate, it's just headed to the House, but I'm sure you probably have some thoughts on it as it comes your guys' way.
Yeah, I mean, first off, because they brought in the face-to-face bill that was passed that says it's time to go back to school face-to-face. So that did pass or signed it this morning. I just want to congratulate our local districts throughout the county. And I know Dr. Haas is on the call throughout the AEA area where I think literally everybody has been back face-to-face and done it safely. So that bill wasn't aimed at all at our area because I think our school districts have been extremely responsive to the needs of the kids as well as the parents and faculty and staff. But the real issue here is the Senate bill and school vouchers. So Senator Shipley and Dawson they are correct. What this bill does is not a big full-blown voucher program. It's a $3 million allocation for the schools that they have mentioned. The fear is, of course, from education, I think a well-founded fear is that this could lead to full-blown vouchers. And I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to the voucher language in the bill. I'm opposed to the charter school language in the bill also. I don't think that that's the right way for us to go right now. I have sympathy, but we have a very strong public school system here in the state of Iowa. We have a very strong accredited non-public school system here in the state of Iowa. And I think they coexist fairly well. And so I will tell you, there are not the votes in the House to pass that bill. There are not the votes in the House Republican caucus, at least now, not even close. There is a lot of opposition to that language because of what it would mean long-term for a system of vouchers in the state of Iowa. Having said that, we've all received a lot of emails. Some of them are very overheated, and I called a couple of teachers on that. And they're passionate about it. I get that, but some of their rhetoric has been a little bit over the top. What I found interesting is everybody's saying absolutely no public money to private schools. Fact of the matter is, the state of Iowa does a lot for non-public schools right now. We help with transportation. We help with textbooks. We help with student tuition organization money that's a tax credit that helps lower income kids get out of those struggling schools that they want to, as well as there's a tax credit for parents that choose to send their children to private schools. So I don't think that that bill has any legs here in the House. I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong, but right now I don't think that legislation is going to move forward in the House. And the only other thing I would add is I come from this at a pretty unique perspective, I think, for anybody that's on this call. I had 18 years as a high school teacher and coach, and I sent both my children to St. Albert's for 12 years, including 13 years, including preschool. Not because I didn't like the public schools. I think our public schools do a wonderful job, but I see both sides of that issue. And I think that the language that could lead to a full-blown voucher system is not the right way for us to go.
Thanks, Representative Segrist. Representative McConkey.
Thank you. I agree with Representative Segrist on a lot of issues. On the bill we passed last night of the 100% face-to-face option, it is an option. The only concerns I had with that, we offered some common sense amendments. Just one that would really upset me. The reason why I voted against the bill, we offered that these schools follow the CDC guidelines and to make sure all the kids are safe. And we wanted funding for the schools to do that. And that was turned down. And there's a CARES Act money for that. So that along with some of the other reasons why I turned it down. Now, everybody wants the kids back 100%. I mean, and nobody's going to disagree with that. And that was my problem with that bill. I didn't see and also if there's a huge outbreak is that they still have to offer that. I mean, people, let me get it wrong. It's an option to do that. They still have an option. Parents have the choice not to. And, I'm good with that. A lot of the bill I was good with, but that was my huge problem with that. And then the schools don't have a local control. Any school district that has a huge outbreak of the pandemic still have to offer that option. And that puts the staff at risk. I mean, we're talking, there's and then the deadline, it's 5 days after the bill passes, they have to come up with a plan. But anyway, that was on that bill. We're not talking about I agree with we support private schools. Many people are surprised. I think $40 million to $50 million in transportation, textbook, tuitions. But yeah, I absolutely. Everybody I talked to was that sends their kids to private school because they want the parochial education. I understand that it's a good education. But people I know, they understand that they did it and they don't expect the taxpayers to pay for it. And we give them a lot of options with tax credits, savings accounts, where they can deduct off their income tax or off the top of their taxes, like an IRA to save tuition for their kids. But yeah, I hope that bill doesn't have legs. I don't agree with a lot of stuff in there. And far as the 5 buildings that are not up to par, there's dangerous for the kids to be in. That's shame on us. That's our problem. It's something where we should have. It shouldn't have got this bad. So anyway, we need to take a look at that.
The next issue is childcare, and Representative McConkey, we're going to actually start with you again, and then we'll go to Representative Segrist. The first 6 bills in the House, I believe it was, related to childcare. We talk a lot about it. The pandemic's really multiplied that issue and brought it forward even more than it had in the past. It was a big issue last year, but obviously got turned on its head because of COVID within an abbreviated session. Can you talk a little bit about some of the childcare bills and how we can best address those in the legislature this year?
Sure. I mean, the bill I'm familiar with is one that offered a child care extended from $45,000 income to $75,000 and then prorated out after that. I mean, that's long overdue. I mean, and then there's tax credits for employees to set up child care. There was a lot of good stuff in that. And I think we just needed to go farther with it. There's a lot more we need to do. And, this pandemic has really brought a lot of that stuff out to when the school closes, what do you do with your kids? And it's unaffordable for, what is it, $600-800 a week per child. I mean, to the point where most people can't afford that. But yeah, a lot of that stuff was a good legislation. And but I think we need to do some more, look into it and see what we can do to help make sure these kids are able to be, the care is there available for the parents where they can go to work. But I'm looking forward to see if we can do more about it.
Thanks, Representative McConkey. Representative Segrist.
Yeah, as Charlie said, those are very important bills, and they are going to move. I think some of it would have happened last year until the pandemic struck kind of a blow to the whole process. But the 2 major ones, there's 6 of them, but 3 of them that have already moved out of committee or they're ready to move. I think a couple of them are out of committee and ready for floor action, but I'd have to check on that. But one of them addresses the cliff effect, where as a person that is getting child care assistance, as they start to move up in their job, make more money, you get to a certain point where if you make this amount of money, you just stop, you drop off the cliff, you get no more assistance. So we're going to make a graduated increase on that, so you can continue to move up, make more money, and you won't lose all your child care assistance at once. You might lose 20% of it. If you get another raise, you lose another 20%. So there's not a cliff. I think that's absolutely going to pass. House Study Bill 2, I believe, increases child care provider rates. That has legs, as we say, and I think that's going to be part of the discussion. And I think you could look for some rate reimbursement increases there. There's another bill that talks about the public-private relationship and so on. That's very important because industries or businesses that can offer childcare services, it's a great tool to attract workers. I know Iowa Western, I know Dr. Kennedy's on the call. You know, we have childcare services at Iowa Western for staff as well as public. And that's a big incentive and a big bonus for your employees if you have that there. So we're doing some things with trying to encourage public-private relationship. Last thing I'd say briefly is one thing we're struggling with, not only on this, on the tax issues and even on education issues, is the onslaught of federal money that has been coming in through the CARES Act and so on, trying to figure out exactly how much is there and trying not to replicate some of the things that we can use the federal money for, or to create programs that when the federal money goes away, which it will, that we're not left holding a big amount of money that we can't afford to continue those programs. So as we work through childcare, as we work through taxes, as we work through education, we have to be cognizant, and we're working very hard to figure out exactly what we can do with that federal money to supplement what we need to do, but not replicate efforts.
Thank you. And Senator Shipley, any comments on the child care?
Absolutely. Child care, it's a huge issue in every community. When I go to every community says they got three issues. One of them's housing, one of them's workforce, and the other is child care. Many of those communities are stepping up to do some things with daycare systems and so forth. And I applaud them for their efforts. I do, but these are House bills. I've not seen anything. The cliff effect has been something that's been needed to be addressed for a very long time. But I would echo a little bit about what Representative Segrist says. We've got to be very careful with this federal money that's coming in, that we don't get addicted to it and plan on spending it and putting it in for ongoing expenses, because it's simply not going to be there. This country can't stand to do that. So we're going to have to be careful of using some of that one-time money for one-time expenses like broadband development. But we can't put it into systems that's an ongoing yearly cost and then find out down the road we can't, something's got to go. So thank you.
And Senator Dawson.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned there, I know there's a large amount of bills in the House, and we have some companion bills that are currently sitting in Ways and Means Committee right now. And they're all really either good ideas or kind of forward thinking on different ways to tackle this problem. We're going to have to, clearly, we're not going to be passing 6 bills this year on childcare. I think it's going to be a conversation going forward as to where we're going to try to target what particular facet of all things childcare this year. I think the cliff effect probably has more legs than maybe some of the other pieces that would involve business credits and things along those lines. Not personally opposed against the business credit to try to inspire employer to offer some type of assistance or program, but then that kind of goes to which businesses are going to utilize it. Typically, what we've seen in the past is most those types of credits go towards larger businesses who might not need those funds anyways, and if workforce is an issue, they might want to dig deeper into their pockets on. Whereas in the smaller businesses, that might be a very useful tool there, where they might not have the additional resources to try to create some type of employer incentive for childcare. So that'll be one conversation going forward. But I would agree. I think the cliff effect from our initial conversations has more legs to it, provided assistance than maybe some of the other proposals.
Thank you. And as I noted, how tax reform is kind of starting in the Senate, child care is kind of started in the House, as you can kind of pick up on. I do have a question from one of our audience members. It's from Brenda Mainwaring and Senator Dawson. It's going to go to you because it's a tax-related issue, but others are obviously welcome to jump in and say something about it after if they would like as well. The question is, will there be a complete fiscal note for the promotional play bill for gaming particularly including the impact on QSOs, which are the quality service organizations, the nonprofit entities that hold the gaming licenses. Last year, the fiscal note said QSOs have their own relationship with casinos and did not directly talk about their fiscal impacts. Communities need to know the impact to QSOs as well. So can you talk about what that fiscal note may look like, or any conversations that are happening with the promotional play issue?
Yeah, Britt, I'll have to take a, typically when the bill passes out of committee is when the fiscal note is generated. I will need to follow up with you on that and see if it has been kicked out by LSA yet or not, and take a look at that as to what the note reflects. And, you know, if it doesn't reflect the QSO piece, then I'm sure there's probably ways we can go about getting that information. I need to take a look at that note there first. I just, we typically just, the process, we don't get those notes generated until once they clear committee, and that bill cleared Wednesday of this week, I believe. So I just haven't had a chance to circle back around and see if it's been attached to the bill jacket or not. Be more happy to follow up with you on that. So.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else having any comment on that one? No. Okay.
No, I haven't seen the bill, but we did on the sports betting, we did able to get the QSOs in on that, and what we held out till we got a little bit more for them. And I suspect that when it comes to the House, that'd be my game plan there too. I mean, I'm sure we need them attached to those.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And thank you, Brenda, for bringing that up, is making sure that we're looking at both of those because of the impacts they have to both of those, both sides of the coin on that. Another issue that was asked about in the chat, and then is a very important one, as shown by the governor asking for $450 million over the next 3 years, is broadband. And Senator Shipley, we'll start with you, because a lot of times we see in some rural communities, sometimes the rural co-ops and others sometimes have some really good services in that regard. We're fortunate here in Council Bluffs to have Blink, which was a public-private nonprofit partnership. But can you touch a little bit on the broadband bill and the importance of that? We saw the bill come out this week, so I want to make sure that we discuss this important issue.
Well, thank you. I'm very fortunate. I am served by one of those small telcos, and here I sit in Adams County, out here in what some people call the middle of nowhere, and I'm able to do this and have just as good a reception, sometimes better than I do when I'm in Des Moines. Hopefully, there's a plan. I know there's a plan going forward. I have not seen it. Some of it, I think, involves some of this CARES money, and it already has been used, I believe, somewhat for some broadband work. But it is crucial. There's no question about it. And as we've discovered with, we've seen everywhere, kids not being able to get online. 20 years ago, the talk was, well, schools won't be needed because all the kids can learn from home. And well, we found out in the last year, that's probably not going to work very well. That was a pipe dream. So I haven't seen the broadband bill that you say that was dropped the other day. Like I say, it's out of my wheelhouse, but I really am looking forward to it. It's interesting, all these small telephone companies out here that many years ago were just kind of laughed and made fun of. They are the leaders in the state of Iowa. There's no question about it. They have done yeoman's work and stepped up and broadening out even of their particular service area to do the work that's needed. It's interesting, the one that I work with here, the manager of that last late winter before COVID hit, told me he'd already, there's always interest on the federal level too, that he'd received more help in the last 3 years from the federal government than he ever had before. So it remains to be seen now if that kind of help is going to continue. We certainly hope it will, because it's just as vital now as electricity was 100 years ago. So anything we can do to help move that process along for everybody to be as lucky as I am here, and my neighbors who are now having their kids being able to move back closer to home with good jobs because they can do their work, part of it online that needs to be.
And we'll go to Representative Segrist, then Representative McConkey, then Senator Dawson.
Yeah, I echo a lot of Tom's comments. A couple of things. One, this is absolutely imperative that we do this for economic development across the state of Iowa, as well as we saw during the pandemic, just having people connected. Tom mentioned, and he's right, we need to see exactly what federal money we can use for the broadband expansion, because we might as well use that money if it's available from some of the federal stimulus packages that have come out from the federal government. And I commend the governor for making this one of her top priorities. I think, again, it's absolutely essential that we do this. Now, having said that, the House has established an information technology committee, and I was talking to the chair of that committee yesterday, actually, and they're still trying to figure out kind of exactly what the governor's bill does and what it says. And I know they're meeting with some people on Monday, so we're waiting to see some of those exact details. The only concern I would have is simply this: is that the governor's recommended $150 million a year for 3 years. I want to make sure that that money can be spent properly and efficiently. $150 million is a lot of money. And like most infrastructure projects you hear about, you need to be shovel ready. I don't know if we have the people ready to do that and the supplies ready. So I'm all for it, but I want to make sure whatever amount of money we appropriate to it, that we can use it efficiently and as quickly as possible, and not just be throwing money at it and not using it in the best way possible. We've seen a lot of that with the federal CARES money, where I don't think it's been appropriated particularly right. And then secondly, where we get the money from my viewpoint, this is one-time infrastructure money. The state of Iowa, aside from the 10% that it has in its cash reserve and economic emergency fund, which we don't touch and we shouldn't touch, we do have a pretty large ending balance after that. To me, we should look at maybe using some of that, because it's a one-time infrastructure project for the benefit of the entire state of Iowa. And I think it might be prudent of us to at least consider using some of our ending balance in order to fund this, which would be good for everybody across the state.
Thanks, Representative Segrist. Representative McConkey, and then Senator Dawson.
Yeah, I'm in line with what Representative Segrist says. I mean, it's something that needs to be done, and it's great. We got the $150 million, but we got to watch how it's spent, make sure it gets used properly. That should move us along quite a bit, but we got to keep continuing funding that, because as Senator Shipley mentioned, in the rural areas and for schools, pandemic has brought out a lot of the reasons why, how important it is, how far it shows where our inequities is in broadband. And we need to expand, do what we can to incentivize, get that done, and get this, because it's going to bring companies in. It's going to bring jobs to Iowa, and it's going to help us. It's going to be huge for the farmers to, because that technology will improve their efficiency and getting their crops planted and save on nitrates, and they're just amazing what they can do if they have broadband available. But yeah, I'm happy for that, and I think we should add more to that when necessary. But we have to get this done, and it's going to be a never-ending. It's going to go on for a long time, and I'd like to see more progress on what we have done. I think we should have more. So, but yeah, I like to see it go forward.
I think that's the last one here. I'll just quickly say, throughout this Zoom, we've gone through an entire budgeting process, right? So we got extra $30 million for workforce housing tax credits, extra $150 million for broadband, childcare as well. These are all good priorities and everything, but in the end, we're gonna have to get the March REC and figure out what our numbers are like and what we come down to. On the broadband and $450 million piece, I would add, the state of Iowa just received $143 million for broadband this next year. So if you tack on the governor's 150 she's requesting plus the 143, you're getting close to $300 million. I don't think it's possible to spend $300 million in a single year on broadband. So while we might hit 450 for a total target, I think the sources where we're getting from is a little bit different, and maybe the time frame it spreads out, because there's a lot of things we got to try to address as well too. I think the mental health region funding is one of those come up here later on. So,
and Thank you, Senator. And really quick, we do have a very limited amount of time, and this is a big issue, but I wanted to make sure we touched on it. Mental health. Can you talk really quickly about the governor's proposal for the $15 million over the next 2 years and the impacts that will have? And Representative McConkey, we'll start with you.
I'll tell you, I don't know if that's gonna be enough. We passed child mental health that mirrors the adult mental health, and that was good. It was a good bill, but we didn't have the funding to really make it work. And I'm not sure. I'm not going to go. I don't have the details on what the governor's plan is, but that's something we need to keep. You know, the money's great, but I think we got a long ways to go in that area.
And then Senator Shipley, and then we'll go Senator Dawson, then Representative Segrist.
Well, absolutely. The mental health thing, I wish we could come up with the system to pay for it with and take it off the property tax rolls, but I don't think that's where that belongs. That's where I've always been a proponent of somewhat of the 3/8 of a cent, with the 3/8 of a cent plus any more money that's generated going towards that, much like the governor's proposal last year. It's got a long ways to go, but we've got to, I think everybody understands. I think it's pretty bipartisan that we've got to figure out a way to make this happen, get it funded.
Senator Dawson, and then Representative Segrist.
Yeah, I would just say probably within our next meeting or shortly thereafter, we're going to have a rather robust proposal coming out of the Senate Ways and Means. Where we talked earlier on, the House has had a very keen focus on, childcare. The Senate Ways and Means, the body of their work this year is going to be extracting that portion out of the governor's Invest in Iowa bill on the mental health piece, using it as a framework. I've got a different tact of how I'm going to go about doing that. But the overall goal is that we're going to provide a new funding system that's not on the back of property taxes, and hopefully give, Potawatomi County is about 45 cents or so of every thousand is what we're spending on the mental health region, to wipe that out entirely, give a little property tax relief, as well as build a better system for the future here. So that literally is probably about a third of my time in meetings here this week, trying to work through the fiscal numbers and get a better grasp of the system. But from a Senate Ways and Means standpoint, that will be the key piece of legislation coming out this session.
And I'm glad to hear that. I know Senator Dawson is working on that. So I think there's a commitment to look at what the governor's recommended and certainly come up with some funding for mental health, which is an epidemic across the state also. You talk to any school superintendent or teachers, student mental health in particular has been extremely prevalent. So hopefully we'll find some consensus on that. And what Senator Dawson said previously at the end of rural broadband is true too. I mean, these are all great programs and we're going to try to fund what we can, but we're limited by the resources that we have available. And so that's why we need to look at the federal money, see what we can use that for, and then make the best use of our money as we move forward. So be it mental health, rural broadband, childcare, those are all issues we're supportive of, and then we got to figure out how to make it all work. But mental health, I think would have gotten funding last year before the pandemic, and I think it absolutely will get some funding this year. Probably never going to be enough, but I think it will be substantial.
Thank you. And we are a little bit past 1 o'clock, so I do apologize for that, but I do want to keep my word and let each legislator provide some closing remarks if they like, some brief closing remarks. We'll go the same order we started with, and that's Senator Dawson and Senator Shipley, Representative Segrist, and then Representative McConkey.
No, thanks for having us here today. The one benefit to this is that I'll probably catch a few more of my kids' games on Saturday mornings than the previous legislative coffees. It's kind of an innovative way to reach out and touch some people. We are only week 3 in the session. There's still a lot more to go. As you can see, we're needing to grapple with some big issues. Stay tuned. So thank you, everyone.
Senator Shipley.
Well, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. I think we probably didn't have quite as many as we would if we were in person, but nonetheless, I think we've had a good discussion here. And I think it's just imperative that everybody get an understanding of the issues that are going on, and I'm always open. Now, this past week with all the emails I was getting on the education stuff, I was not able to answer everybody, but I did answer a good share of them. And interestingly enough, many of them didn't quite understand that what the facts really were. But anyway, we appreciate all you, especially all you folks in education, what you're doing, the difficulties you're having to deal with. Um, I don't deal with it every day, but my daughter does across the river in Gretna. But I think it's a little different even in Gretna than it is in many places in Council Bluffs. Got a lot of issues to deal with, and the people are working really hard to take care of the kids they've got. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and I think all of us do. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator, and then Representative Segrist and Representative McConkey.
Yeah, I would just follow up with something Tom just said, and that is because of internet these days, I mean, legislators, I'm finding out, get bombed with emails and so on. And I mean, I deleted over 100 today after I looked at them. You know, some of them are form letters from all over the state. Some of them are nowhere, you know, from Muscatine or whatever. And I look at them, and sometimes I respond, but a lot of times, you know, I read them and take that into effect. But what I want to say to the people on the call is, if you're emailing me or any of us, and you're anywhere near us, Potawatomi County or anywhere near us, you know, try to mention that so that we make sure we know that. I'll get some emails and I have no idea where they're from, and you know, some of my answer, but the volume is so overwhelming. So if you're near us, please let me know anyway, somewhere in the letter that you're from here, so I make sure I answer it. Now, don't misunderstand. It's like I'm not reading them or I'm not answering them, but you can't answer everything from all over the state. You just don't have the time. So if it's somebody local, please let us know that. Other than that, yeah, it's been a busy start and a little bit of a controversial start. But I think in the end, what I always said before is, you know, judge us by what we've done at the end. And I think we're going to have a very successful session. I think we're going to do a lot of good things to advance the everyday lives of ordinary Iowans. And so don't get caught up in this issue or that issue, but do look at the whole thing when we're done, hopefully sometime in April. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody today.
Thanks, Representative Segrist. You make a really good point. Like, judge it at the end. Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a lot of things that can happen. So, yeah, Representative McConkey.
Well, I want to thank everybody for, like I said, I'm disappointed that it's not near the size it used to be. But yeah, it's like I started out at the beginning. I'm real disappointed with priorities of the majority party so far. You'd see pandemic should be the priority. Instead, it's abortion, gun rights, taxes, and you know, that we should be fast tracking what we can to make sure we get the vaccine to everybody that's needs. And I realize there's a shortage of vaccine, but we need to work on that. And that should be the first thing we need to do. And, you know, in saying that, it's always a pleasure to work with the representatives and the senators here. You know, we have our differences, but I believe we both have the same common goal. I mean, we just want to make lives better for the people in our district in the state of Iowa. I mean, that's what we're elected to do. And that's what I'm planning on doing. So I want to thank everybody, and you have a good weekend.
Thanks, Representative McConkey, and thanks everyone for attending. I think we were up to about 90 people at the highest number, so thank you for everyone who attended. I do want to let you know this was recorded, so if you have someone asking you about it, we can share the recording. That's a resource we want to make sure we can provide to our members and others who would find this as a good resource. We thank the media that joined us on the call as well, and we thank the legislators yet again and our sponsors. Thank you all, and have a very nice weekend.